I want to thank Muso Design Group for our beautiful stage decor. They sourced product from all over ADAC to put together this beautiful arrangement for all of our panelists today. I want to say a special thank you to our showroom partner today, that's Fabricut. Remember that we will go upstairs into Suite 307 for a reception following our presentation. And then a very special thank you to Flower Magazine for bringing us today's presentation. Flower's always an awesome partner to ADAC, and we're so grateful. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to founder and editor-in-chief, Margot Shaw.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, ADAC. Thank you, Fabricut, and AJ Finer. And when I was trying to learn his name, I was calling him Tyner, and then oh no, it's Finer. What a great, he is finer than anybody I know here. And I thought, and he's shaking his head, but I'm nodding. He is. He's so sweet and such a great partner. So thank you, AJ, and thank you, Fabricut. Welcome to our panel of Margot's men. I know, right? So as they say in England, they are all fit. I've been watching some British programming in advance. But anyway, this is a panel that is one of my favorite topics. It's all about past and present and some future. And so I'm going to just read these intros because this panel is so steeped in cred that I couldn't memorize their bios. In the middle, we have Barry Dixon. Inspired by acres of lush Virginia countryside, Barry Dixon is known for a distinct aesthetic that blends Western styles with global influences from a childhood spent abroad in India, Pakistan, Korea, New Caledonia. Where is that?
On the Great Barrier Reef.
Okay, thank you.
An island off the Australian coast.
New Caledonia, y'all probably knew that, I did not, and South Africa. With projects spanning the world, Dixon imagines interiors that infuse artifacts and antiques with present-day motifs, all preserving the history and personality of the home's owners and their treasures. His exclusive collections include furniture, lighting, and accessories for interiors, showroom design and products for Fortuny, fabrics, trims, and wall coverings for Vervain, upholstery for Tomlinson, now owned by Krabbit, and the Naturals Color Collection by Barry Dixon for C2 Paint. You can just surround yourself with Barry Dixon. In 2023, Dixon launched his 6th collection with Arteriors while also developing a new line of furniture and lighting with La Testa Studio. Next year, Dixon will unveil a new bespoke fabric and trim collection with Vervain. His projects are also featured in several books, including Barry Dixon Interiors, Barry Dixon Inspirations, Farrow and Ball, The Art of Color, I just got that, Fortuny Interiors, and many others. Dixon's currently working on his 3rd book and participating in an upcoming publication devoted to Gracie panels. You're busy.
Certainly are.
Barry Dixon. And at the end, Jared Hughes. He is a globally inspired Atlanta designer with deep roots in the South and an awesome man bun. Which I don't usually like, but I think it works for him.
I think it does too.
I think obviously. His penchant for antiques, history, and architecture are at the heart of his work, and his fascination with fabrics is the starting point for nearly all his design projects. His obsession with color allows him to rethink the past and create livable, layered spaces. With over 15 years' experience in design, Hughes produces projects that feel timeless and classic with an unexpected twist, so a perfect candidate for our panel topic today. First time I ever saw Jared's work was at a Southern Style Now house in Savannah.
It was in Savannah. Mm-hmm.
And I fell in love. I thought this is one to watch, and I have, and it's been worth it. And last but not least, to my left, Matthew Gomez, Managing Director of Tournelle and Gigon and Jean Monro. Did I pronounce that right?
Perfect.
I'm so proud.
Been practicing all morning.
I really have. Matthew began his career in the interiors industry in 1977 as a cutter and packer, and we'll talk more about that later.
Thank you.
Progressing swiftly to spending many formative years on the road as a sales rep. He realized his dream and started his own company in 1984. In a few years, joined forces with Monique Gigon to establish the Tournelle and Gigon Group in 1986. He'd always held a fascination for traditional fabrics and trimmings and a passion for classic design, craft, and provenance. As a result, this has become the ethos of Tournelle and Gigon and all the brands it represents. And they are many, and we'll talk about that. Tournelle and Gigon works with and actively supports some of the oldest surviving fabric and trimming mills, helping to keep techniques and qualities alive that would otherwise certainly disappear. Thank you for that. Jean Monro Limited has continued the tradition, started by Jean and has grown, is it Jean or Jean?
Jean.
Oh, good. And has grown to include, in addition to its unique and much treasured collection of floral chintz and hand blocks, the renowned Ram, Sun, and Crocker collection, Nikki Haslam's wonderful fabric collection, and invaluably, an extensive historical textile archive, the continuing source of our timelessly English collection of prints. For many years, both Tournelle and Gigon and Jean Monro have been proud suppliers to the British royal household, each company being awarded the honor of the Royal Warrant. Congratulations on that. So, our panel, Margot's Men. So the topic today is the power of the past in present design. I wanted to start with us just kind of setting some foundational things, like what do we mean when we say the past, when we reference design? Let's think about elements and styles and maybe designers from all over, but from the past, what do you mean, Jared, when you think about the past in design?
I think specifically it's also like seems to be a TikTok trend right now, the Roman Empire. But it's not just the Roman Empire. I think about like how architecture really got its roots in Greece and Italy, and the columns, the pediments, the beautiful details that we still use today are that long ago. That I think about the past that far back, even when we're referencing design.
The classics.
The classics.
The foundation. Yeah. And I think about your room your space that you did for us for Flower in our Atlanta show house last year. And I will never forget seeing Jared coming into the house schlepping this huge, heavy Roman marble bust, right?
There was a couple of busts, and there was also a Italian marble, like a lion paw that we had found.
That's
The
right.
lion's paw. I mean, it weighed about as much as I do, and I brought it back in my carry-on. The container was not getting back quick enough so that we could use it in the show house. So there was like, several heavy objects that came back in bags on the plane.
And worth every
very much worth
schlep.
it.
Yes, I remember. So Barry, what about you?
Oh, gosh. I probably, certainly we start with the classics. We start with proportions of the Romans and the Greeks and even the Egyptians. And you do this. And I even go farther back. This new collection I've been working on with Arteriors, I've looked at a lot of sort of primordial artifacts and things like that I'm playing with. So to me, what I love about looking backward is to see our way forward in a new way. And there's some star idea in pretty much every period that you might explore. And I think what's modern is to look at those traditional things and put them together in a new way so that you kind of can create an environment that pays homage to that but isn't slave to it. No one, I think, wants to live in a museum quality room or a set from an old film, but at the same time, we don't want to leave that behind either. So I like to curate those things into a modern home for our clients.
You do a wonderful job. I think about your library in our show house and just all the wonderful classical elements, but then with such a twist. Can you talk a little bit about those pediments that you had fabricated?
That's part of a line that was originally our Averett line that was through R. Hughes here in Atlanta. Is where we kind of debuted a lot of those things that's now going to Iatesta and Holly Hunt. So they're metal mesh pieces. I call it phantom furniture. I wanted sort of colossally scaled things that I could put antiquities. I used a pair of old busts too that were some that I found in England that were 18th century that I bought on a buying trip there, and had one of each. Peter Block, our architect there, had done that. There were those beautiful oval windows, and I didn't really, drapery treatments on a little oval window looked really strange. I wanted to find something to play with, so I did the metal mesh backdrop as a screen to diffuse light, and then I set more mesh in front of that.
That's right.
And from angles, it kind of moires the pattern of that metal mesh. And so it seemed like those heavy busts. I didn't carry them back on a plane, but Headley's picked them up, and I saw the build. They were heavy. So I wanted them to be floating in the ether with the light coming around, basically the aura through the sunlight of those oval windows, flanking the Chesneys, the again, traditional marble fireplace against all those paneled walls. So rather than do more drapery there, I thought that was a modern way to present those classical elements.
It was a genius way.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it was very.
I also thought of old
spectacular.
Southern porch screens
Yeah.
and screen doors on the farm, and that all of that brindled into that room.
Well, and I love that reference, and I think that's such a part of design that, especially in the South, but all over, the story, and we don't know unless we talk to you and hear from you that was your influence, that but they were genius. They really were.
Well, thank you.
But it was a perfect representation of what we're talking about, which is past and present.
Well, part of that past aren't just the great traditional classic elements that we see from the Greeks or whatever, but past is also the nostalgia of our own personal life.
Exactly.
And that my grandmother's screen door going out on the farm outside to the garden reminded me of those. So that's what I think when we're talking about curating all these different elements into a space, that's what you're bringing forward.
Where can we find those again?
Iatesta Studio,
Iatesta.
formerly David Iatesta,
Okay.
and they are represented through Holly Hunt National.
Okay, that makes sense. They're very Holly Hunt, but they're really very Barry Dixon.
I think you're actually there.
They're at Ainsworth.
They're at Holly Hunt with some, but we're at Ainsworth Noah here in Atlanta.
And
That's where
do
that's
you think
going.
there are some?
They're not there yet. We've been transitioning the entire product line into
Stay
that
tuned,
group.
and if you no, because really they are.
The lighting came first, and now the case pieces are following.
They are magnificent and chic and
Well, thank you.
very modern, but with that classic reference of the Southern screen door. Oh, y'all, I forgot to tell you, please turn your phones off.
Now.
I mean, while we're at it. So, can I call you Matt?
You can, please.
What does your wife call you?
Well, you don't want to know that. You really don't want to know that. Just Matt. It'll be
Just
great.
Matt is good. So I loved it. So when I first met Matt this morning, he was demurring about being with all these designers, and he said that when he told his wife he was going to be on a design panel, she fell out laughing. And I thought,
Well, look at these two.
yeah,
I mean,
but look at him.
I literally make it, they hang it.
That's
So
right.
I am a fraud, but anyway.
You're not a fraud. You're not a fraud. But tell us what the past, I mean, everything that you have, everything at Tournelle and Gigon and Jean Monro is so related, referencing the past, and a lot of it is from the past. So can you talk a little bit about that, and then maybe kind of today, what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the most important part of any traditional company is its archive. So we have a really extensive archive. We have probably, I would say it would be, but it's arguably certainly the second largest English print archive in the world. We are a combination of, I don't know if any of you remember a company called Ramson and Crocker. We bought Ramson and Crocker out of a liquidation. I think it was owned by Robert Allen here. And they didn't know they owned the company. So we found, well, I should say at this point, if I carry on talking, just yawn or something, because my wife tells me I get too excited about all of this, so I go on and on and on.
Oh, no, don't get excited.
So I'll try and keep it as short as possible. Ramson and Crocker went into liquidation. It was owned by Robert Allen. And I phoned the company, phoned the liquidators, and I asked them, do you own this company called Ramson and Crocker? And they said, no, we don't have a company called that. So anyway, I said, you do. I can tell you do own this company. So he said, give me 5 minutes. He called me back and he said, you know what, we have this company. So I said, I want to buy it. And he said, well, what do you want to give me for it? So I said, I'll give you £5,000. So he said, done. So I bought this company. And part of the agreement was I had 2 hours to drive to High Wycombe, which is about 25 miles outside London. And I had 2 hours that I was allowed into their warehouse. And I went with my colleague, Sophie, who's the managing director of Jean Monro, went into this warehouse, and it was like something out of Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was an enormous warehouse. And I went right to the back of the warehouse, climbed all the way up to the top of the shelving, and there was this archive. It was just in boxes. And it is, you can see it online. It is without doubt one of the most beautiful archives in the world. It's over 10,000 documents dating back to 1810. So it has everything. So for me, sorry to bore you a bit there.
No.
For me, everything starts with an archive. Anything I do references back to an archive. And these esteemed gentlemen here, I'm sure everything they work with somewhere started from an archive. We need history, and we need to protect history. And I think, as Barry and I were discussing last night, for me, good design, and I'm not a designer, is using the old and the new. Because we need to keep the old going, because it's the old that made the new. So that's as much as I can give you on a design front. These are the gentlemen who can tell you the proper design side. So.
That's so important. And yes, the history is so important in all those archives. So I was reading about that you designers can come and request a new colorway.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Like an old.
Any of our archive, because generally we own the screens, we now have the world of digital. But within us, we have hand blocking, which is the oldest form of printing, and we have screen printing. So for us to print any special colors is very easily done. It's a skillful thing, and you need gentlemen like this to be able to do it. It's not an easy thing to produce a special colorway or design fabrics like these gentlemen do. It's not an easy thing. And you imagine how many fabrics there are in the world, and of all the fabrics in the world, only 20% of them sell well. It's the 80-20 rule. So it's a very skillful thing.
And do you have some of those 20%?
Oh, we have them all.
He
Of
said,
course.
in all modesty, of
Yeah.
course you do.
Yeah.
Of course you do. I'd like for all of y'all to talk for a minute about new color, because you're talking about doing old archival designs, but with new colors. What would that mean to you, Barry, a new color? And how would it be applied?
I guess I'd say, again, nothing is completely new in the world, especially
True.
in the world of color. I think most of it
True.
was around before we were. But at the same time, it's new that we bring it back or bring a version of it back or put it with another color in a stranger way or a more modern way that might have been played against before. What I find is the farther I look back, the more brazen the color. Mm-hmm. It's like if you really go into archive like that, like, when we had that moment of realization that all the Greek statues and things were painted in garish colors with colorful eyes and hair and garments, and they weren't those marble icons that we thought. They were very colorful in a way that wouldn't even be considered fashionable at this point. But for me, I rediscover colors that I might have liked, that I might have gotten a little less enamored of over time, and then a different version of that chartreuse with just a tad more yellow becomes a new color in my arsenal, because I think we put colors like quivers in our, arrows in our quiver, and we shoot them around. And you're looking for those new weapons to use, I think, with design.
So violent colors,
yeah,
weapons.
I'm
kidding. I'm kidding. No.
A really, really good exercise I had in that was years ago. I was hired by then Senator Frist, who was the majority leader of the Senate at that time in Washington. I'm the only private designer to ever work under the dome of the Capitol building, because it's usually National Archive. We talk about archives and things like that. And I was hired by them on their dollar to redo the majority leader's offices. And Mrs. Frist, Karen Frist, I'm getting ready to start a new home in Nashville for this month, suggested they'd like to go back to some of the original colors. And it had been painted over the years many times. And so we did this little analysis, sort of almost a finger-shaped, a little machine comes in and punches through all the colors, and then they separate them all on a sheet and blow them up. And you see all the colors that those hallowed offices, if you look at the back of, I think it's a $10 bill, I was doing drapery treatments for all those windows that you see up to the left of the Capitol on the Senate side, not the House side. And the colors that came back were, electric hot pink, mauve, blue-greens not found on any bird's egg in nature, things with poison in them and arsenic, and all. You had no idea that all those colors had paraded across the walls of one of our most hallowed buildings. The corner of the building that I was doing was the only portion of the Capitol left after the Brits burned it down. And it was there was a little war going on at the time. So it was the old Jefferson Library.
He wasn't alive when that happened.
It was the Jefferson Library corner. So as I saw some of the colors, I thought, well, maybe that's why they set it on fire. But the truth is that there is no new color. There's just new, and participating with Farrow and Ball and people like that and doing the color with C2 colors, I realize there's no new color under the sun. It's just new at that moment.
So that is fascinating. So when you said a finger, you went into the wall?
Yeah, there's a little device, a machine, that drills in. It's like a scene from, like something Tom Cruise would do to a safe in a film. To get into some place. So this little machine that makes a high-pitched noise goes into the wall, and it extracts a cylinder of the plaster, and then they can shale off with another machine every paint color layer. It's like
and do a chemical
Floman's
analysis.
Island of a tree in the
layer.
layer.
In my house.
So you can see every color, and they can carbon date the color. So you know that between 1801 and 1804 it was this, and then in 1805 they painted it this color. Blah blah blah.
Fascinating.
They do
So you
that
can
in
see every
Charleston a
color.
lot.
Yeah,
Lots of historic homes in Charleston they do that with. We were just at the Nathaniel Russell House in Charleston last week, and they've taken the original color of the bedroom back, and it is a shocking orange. I mean, it is more vibrant orange than like egg yolk on acid. It's a crazy, crazy color. And that was the original color of the bedroom, and they've done the same thing where they bore into the wall, and they can tell you that the original paint color was this, it was distemper paint, and they can see when it's changed or been plastered over, and I mean, it's really crazy.
And it's true, because if you look at English chintz today, you think it's bright. Go right back to the 1800s in the archive, much brighter. Much brighter.
Yeah,
Everything
your
was.
Rose and Fern has that Eve Klein blue in it that was like so shocking. When I saw that, it was one of the original colorways.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like, it feels almost modern. That's one reason we were so
but
attracted
it's way
to using
back.
it.
I think
but
it's from 1806.
Yeah.
So I wonder what that was about. I wonder, because it must have been harder to make really vibrant colors. You think about the, antiquity and how hard they only had a few colors that they could work with. So
It was
you think
candlelight.
Yeah, I started to say they didn't have electricity.
They didn't have electricity, so
That's
the
it.
colors
It
had to be
more
more
It had to be something
amplified
that you could see
by
at
light.
night when they'd be having the dinner parties and the balls and things. They were just by candle.
See, I love this.
And also chintz was shiny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got
Traditional
the
chintz was
glaze.
shiny, so it would reflect light.
Exactly.
So it looks a lot brighter. And the reason we have chintz, proper chintz, you can't get proper chintz now because it's illegal to make the sheen on it because it was made by chemicals by the Victorians. But they made chintz originally because the Victorians didn't like dust. So you can just brush the dust off a chintz. It was almost the first performance fabric ever made.
And it reflects
Support me
light
here,
in those
guys.
big dark Victorian houses.
Correct.
That's why you have crystals on chandeliers only.
Yeah.
They
Those
were just there.
lazy Victorians.
Yes, true. And the proper chintz now, if you find them, we've got them in the archive, you can crack them.
You can crack them.
You can crack it because it's just a powerful chintz. So you can imagine if you hang it as curtaining, you just brush it off and the dust comes off.
Brilliant.
So-
And the way they made those colors, one of my favorite colors from Farrow and Ball has always been Chiara Yellow, which comes from Chiara Castle in Ireland. It's actually an Irish castle. And I remember asking the gentleman when they still owned Farrow and Ball when we were doing that first book, because that was the color I had painted my music room in my old Stanford White House. And I said, how did they get that color? And they said, well, it was really, we still make it the way they made it, but it's not commonly known, but we get that from cow urine. And that's what's in, so that's what I've spread all over my walls. I do see cattle out through my view, and I've really
about the
brought the
smell.
outside in.
Okay, this is degenerating a little bit. I'm kidding. But those are the kinds of things that are fascinating to me.
And they're true. We're not,
And they're
Yeah.
true. I know, you think about chintz. I remember we had a piece in Flower on chintz where Karen Carroll had written it, your pal, and I learned that chintz in the 18th century was outlawed in France and England because of the textile mills, the extant
It's quite true.
textile mills being threatened. So they lobbied to have chintz, which was originally from India, that was so cheap,
That's right.
outlawed. And so the only people that could wear it were Marie Antoinette and her court or whoever. And it was kind of a Pita thing with the paint and the fur coat. If you were walking down the streets in London with chintz on, someone would come and rip it off. I mean, so, fabric, oh my gosh.
Try doing that now.
And yeah, well,
They'd lock you up. But
yeah, they would. They would. But,
and there's so little to rip off.
Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
I'm going to pull that little patch off of you.
But it's just interesting. So, speaking of history and today, we were earlier discussing a party, or an event happening that you were commissioned to produce in France, and the connection with the copper.
Oh, the rollers, yeah.
Can y'all talk about that? And I think you were listening to, I don't know.
Oh, I was there.
Yes,
Listening,
yeah.
listening,
It's
learning.
not at the Ritz, but anyway, can y'all talk about that? Because,
You go
I
first.
think it's
Your-
so interesting.
Your creation.
Well, upon meeting you, I didn't realize that you had the Berger, the Pierre Berger line, which was the original toile fabric that was made. So, and a lot of those original toiles were in such bright and vibrant colors.
Yeah.
And years ago, for their centennial, I had been hired by then owner of the Ritz in Paris, Mohammed Al-Fayed, to create an event in Washington. He really wanted to, because of all the ambassadors there from all the different countries, he picked that because he thought Embassy Row would be a good audience. All of the ambassadors and all of their wives came, and all the people doing all those, and they'd be going back to all the countries. So he was really a smart businessman, which is why he owned Harrods and the Ritz and things like that. Anyway, since it was a French company, and he decided we needed a tent behind the Washington Design Center. We had gone to great lengths to have the Escoffier School chefs come over to create this incredible banquet. The Kennedy family owned the Washington Design Center. They were involved, and they could pull a lot of strings. We got a whole city blocked off behind the Washington Design Center. And we were going to go through what I was going to affect different moments at the Ritz inside. And you come in the front door, including I had the blue and white awnings that would lead you through the front. And we recreated through projection and imagery the interior of the Ritz in different rooms and people there. And the final place was a giant toile tent, and I chose the Pierre Berger, and that balloon pattern that you were talking about, which he was telling me more about, was what I chose.
Let's interrupt and tell about the balloon.
Yeah, these wonderful magenta balloons on my white background.
So it's a toile de joie called Ballon de Gonesse, and it's the history of the first flight of a hot air balloon just outside Paris. Gonesse is about 15 miles outside Paris. And it was the story of this balloon being up, and the farmers saw this balloon coming over, and they were horrified. They'd never seen a balloon before. They shot the balloon down. And the thing about Toile de Juillet, we are now reprinting the Toile de Juillet with Charles Berger on the original rollers. They were printed on copper rollers of 69 centimeters wide, and the copper rollers date back to about 1710. And the thing about copper rollers is you can get, I don't know, when you see a Toile de Juillet, you get this sort of juttering of color. That's what makes a Toile de Juillet work, it's the fineness. You can't get that in any form of printing other than the copper rollers because it gives you a bleed of the ink. So we're busily recreating them. But I was saying earlier, they were a form of newspaper. So they depicted news and things that happened. So this was Ballon de Gonesse. And I think it's quite ironic, when Concorde sadly crashed, you probably all remember it crashed in Paris, Concorde crashed in Gonesse. And I just think it's like repeating history. Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah. So don't fly over Gonesse.
No, don't go.
Yeah.
And I think it was an 18th century document that they produced that from. So it was that old, and I was using it because I saw the balloon motif around the world in 80 days. I had Embassy Row coming. That's why I chose the pattern. And we needed 1,200 yards of it, and Berger sent it over. Charles Berger sent us 1,200 yards of this magenta toile. They printed it all up.
Great client.
And it was a wonderful... It was free, too. It was for a charity. But I have used a lot of it since. I don't know that I've used 1,200 yards in any particular project. But anyway, it turned out so beautiful.
That whole thing, that notion of it was a newspaper. I mean, the events of the day or people or...
It was about gossip, and it was a way of pictorially, because they didn't print newspapers in those days. So it was just history kept up.
Who knew?
But a little more elegant than those newspapers you see in pub bathrooms on the wall.
Yes. So not to this day, but as long as Fayed owned the Ritz, you stayed?
Oh, that was just a side note, but he really loved the
Wait,
what
tell
we
the
did.
story about him, when he was late. I'm sorry.
I didn't know. So
You've been saying all these things.
On the third or fourth meeting, he flew me over 6-7 times working on this, and because we worked on it for a year before their centennial. It was the 100th anniversary of the Ritz, Paris. And that, of course, that was Caesar Ritz who had started that. The Ritz-Carlton all here is not affiliated in any way.
Yeah.
Ritzy became something that was associated with this particular hotel in France, as opposed to chintzy. I won't say anything like that, but it's sort of the opposite. But it's a ritzy thing. Ritz crackers, they'll be the richest crackers. That became a word in our vernacular, as we were putting on the Ritz. So he was celebrating that and all things to do with that. And it has the storied history of Chanel having her atelier there in her apartment at the Ritz, Coco Chanel and Proust and Hemingway and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor and all these people. So each trip he put me like that. Those 3 days I'd stay these 3 days in Coco Chanel suite. The next time he would put me in Proust suite. The next time whatever. So I would absorb these things and be able to bring that out in Washington for the centennial. And he couldn't figure out how he would get it all in. And the idea that he liked the most that I ended up doing is I copied a frame that they had in the Hall of Versailles. It feels like that long shopping hall, which was the first shopping mall in the world, the long hall at the Ritz in Paris with all the different things from little tidbits from different places all over the world would be for sale in those cases. That was called the first shopping mall, that hall. So he loved that I took this frame from that hall. I did a plaster cast of a corner of it. He allowed me to do that. And then I reproduced it as a giant, almost like the Hemingway bar there. And then I projected it. There were all these incredible images. And I took everything because some of them were color, some were black and white. And I went to the sepia tone and printed all of these with Chanel, but with also Grace Kelly or Jacqueline Deribe or the Rockefellers or whoever might have been there, all the people that had come and stayed and that were part of that history, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. And in a montage, I blew it up so that they would be the size we were in the room. So they were all 5 to 6 feet high in this giant, it became a mirror to the past, and it was a projection thing that we did across the main body of the entrance before you went out into the Charles Berger tent. And he loved that. And then he sent me this wonderful package. And it was one of those things like an artichoke. You open it up and it's something big and it gets smaller. It was wrapped in this, and I thought, what is it going to be in here? It was like opening it up. And in the very center of it at the end was a platinum card, and it had my name on it. And on the back was engraved, this entitles Mr. Dixon to be our guest at the Ritz Paris as long as we own the hotel. And until it was recently redone, I stayed free at the Ritz Hotel for 20 years.
So, but talk
I
about
can't now. They have a new
They're
owner.
rebuilding it.
Yes.
when he was going to meet with you and did.
Oh, well, that third meeting, I digressed. I'm talking too much about this.
No, I'm sorry. Fun.
It was second, I think the third or fourth meeting. Denise Coué, who ran everything and who's she was basically the concierge there. I joined her at breakfast, and he was supposed to be joining at breakfast, and he didn't come. And she said, "Well, let me go and check." An hour or so later, I'm eating more croissants. She came back and said, "Well, it's going to be lunch, but just stay here, read the paper." This was before I even had a laptop or anything like that. And so I wait. I got down there for an early breakfast. It's now lunch. I'm now having late lunch. She said it might be dinner. And then she comes back mid-afternoon and says, he's not going to make it. He's detained. And so I decided I'd fly on back that night instead of staying the next day or two because he was going to be detained. And when I was getting on the plane in Paris to come back home, they're handing out the newspapers there. Do you want Figaro or do you want, London, whatever?
They just throw them.
And I picked up the paper, and the cover of the London paper was that he had been arrested at the airport heading to Paris that morning because he had said something that they considered a threat to the Queen. His son had been killed, Dodi Al-Fayed, in that tunnel not long before, and he was accusing the royal family of possibly being part of that because he was a man, and I loved him, but I think he was just a man in terrible mourning.
No filter.
Yeah, he had some,
either.
So he was in jail, is why he couldn't come join me for breakfast. So while I sat there having tea and croissants, he was in jail in London. So anyway.
So Jared, I want to talk to you a little bit because of all of us on the stage, I believe you are the junior, age-wise.
A long way away.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Can you, because one of the reasons I wanted you on this panel so much was that you are somebody, you're not an emerging designer, you've emerged and you are established. And you are someone who really respects antiquity. And yet your work is so modern. In my opinion, and are there a couple of sort of hooks that you hang your work on that, things that you have to do, things that you can't live without, things that are going to always bring the past into the future?
I think one of the things that we specifically strive to do, and looking at our work, it's hard maybe to see it because a lot of people look at our work and think it's so much. There's actually a lot of restraint. And that's kind of what makes our work feel fresh. A skirted table, it doesn't have to have a trim on it. You don't have to slap a trim on a lampshade. You don't have to overdo bows and ruffles and things like that.
Even a skirted table now. Talk about that, because that's sort of new old.
It is. I think it's, there's so many, we don't often come into new build houses. Most people that are hiring us, we're working on historic properties. New build architecture is something that, for the most part, gives me the ick. And so there's ways that you have to go in and kind of soften. And so I think adding fabric in different ways is something that was, in the past, it was to show more status and money. It was like you buy as much fabric as you can, use it everywhere you can. And now we're using it in a different way as to kind of soften and highlight. So I think it's just taking different ways of doing things from the past and keeping them fresh by keeping them a little more simple.
And you do it brilliantly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't, there's a lot of designers who, if something sits still long enough, they're gonna slap trim on it. Or they'll slap a monogram on it, and that's very Southern, but at the same time, it's one of those, that's how I think it looks outdated to some degree. It doesn't have the crispness and the cleanness that makes you focus on the fabric that's on the table skirt instead of the trim that's on the table skirt, or the ruching or the ruffling or the pleating. Those are beautiful ways and craftsman details that we still, very much use, but it's a way that we try to work with restraint so that it's focusing on exactly what's pretty about the past.
And also, I feel like your work has a great mix.
We do. We don't focus
Antique
on like one period.
Yeah.
So I like antiques from all kinds of periods, anything from 16th century Italian things all the way up to some brand new pieces that are like contemporary modern art, and mixing those I think gives just a little bit of tension that makes something feel fresh. It's like the juxtaposition between the crazy abstract painting on a beautiful Gracie wallpaper, for example. That's something that I think we do a lot because it's the contrast that attracts people to that.
But it can go badly awry too. So I mean, you do it beautifully, and so do you, Barry. Is there something that you, Barry, love, that a thread of antiquity that runs through all of your projects? One thing, or?
I think maybe a thread there is the form and shape, the silhouette of things.
Yeah.
And that's what you can use as a tool to connect these different eras and aesthetics. They can have a curve in common. They can have something, they can be the yin to the other's yang. They need to complement each other like any good couple. And in a way, opposites attract and make the best union. So I think you kind of look for something that's similar, and then at the core of that too, they're very different, so that they enhance each other without falling into each other and merging to become one thing. Mm-hmm. They still need to be slightly contrasted, for that, so that they get noticed individually.
So I know you're not a designer, Matt, but what?
Well guessed.
When you know what you like,
Mm-hmm.
and so what do you like?
I like print. I print over weave. I love hand blocks. Hand block printing to me is everything.
You have a lot of that.
I have a lot of hand blocks. We probably have the largest selection of hand blocks in the world. To me, a real privilege is to be able to produce a new hand block. It's so hard to produce them. It takes 18 months. It's an 18-month delivery on hand block. So you can imagine how much we have to put into getting a new one printed, because there's almost at capacity. We can't print anymore at the moment and can't get them. But to me, if you want to see the pinnacle of printing, and I'm passionate about it, because these gentlemen are talking about color, nothing, and Jared used the hand block in the show house, nothing shows color better than a hand block.
True.
It's the perfect way to see color, and it's what we should all strive for, because the Victorians used it, and it holds its color forever. Because if you see modern printing techniques, when you get a fabric, all of you, look at the back of it. Nowadays, you probably hardly see any ink on the back. Look at a hand block. A lot of our decorators, Nikki Haslam, uses the back of our hand blocks, not the face of them.
Oh, I love that. He's such a renegade.
Well, he's a bit off the wall, yeah.
Okay, I have one. Okay, I have one last question, and that is, you are on a desert isle, and you have one piece, one item that you were allowed to take with you on that desert isle. What is it, Jared?
Air conditioning.
You know what? You know what? My father used to always say, Morgan, nobody likes a smart ass. And I would say, but yes, they do. So thank you. But do you have a serious answer?
I don't know. Maybe a chair, somewhere to sit.
But what?
A lounge chair.
But what style? I mean, I'm trying to get you to distill
A
one thing.
Oh, you know what? We have a very beautiful Caribbean Regency daybed that we did use in the show house.
Okay.
And it is caned, so I could lay on that. There would be some nice air movement through the cane.
Okay.
Yep, there you go.
Okay, Thank you. There you have it. Very.
It's so sad that he just stole my day bed. I was going to say, my funny answer was going to, when I heard that, I thought, I'm glad he's first. What's mine going to be? Dog. The first thing I thought was, I'm going to carry my dog. I mean, you'd even leave your partner at home because you got to have that dog there.
That's right.
And then I thought if I had a day bed, I could get on it with the dog. But that's literally what I was going to say was a day bed. It's sort of like your boat on the island.
Yeah.
You can float there on that. I love these, I pictured the John Himmel woven when on the island because it's hard to put, that if you did like a French metal bed that you would drape in toile, that metal heats up in the sun on that island. So I was thinking if I did that rush weave, I was being practical, but I was picturing that day bed.
Okay.
And
Okay,
cushions.
but you can't have the day bed. You have to have something else.
Well, then I might take, I really want the day bed. I might also take a beautiful piece of art that I really love, something that I can go into because I'm going to get tired of that view.
Yeah.
Something that gave me another view,
Okay.
other than water everywhere and not a drop to drink.
That's so smart. Another view. Another
I'd
view.
go into my painting,
I love that. Okay. Nothing in
but
particular.
I'd rather see it from a day bed.
Okay, all right. You can have the day bed.
Sand get you sweat. You're
Yeah,
sitting in it.
okay, you can have the day bed too. Okay, Matt, what about you?
Well, I would ultimately take a jacquard loom because I love weaving and I love printing, but that's totally impractical. So I'd take my great-grandfather's grandfather clock because I inherited it and it was broken and smashed to pieces, and I spent the last 25 years rebuilding it.
I love that.
So I should have said my wife, but I think I'd take I'd take the clock.
Object.
Well, I call her thing sometimes as
okay.
well. No, I would take my grandfather clock because I spent so much time on getting it to work. Break my heart if I left it behind.
Yeah, it would, and you'd need to know what time it was because you'd be so
Exactly,
busy
exactly.
on that desert island.
Well, we got the chair. We can get the air conditioning, the clock. We're getting there, aren't we?
I hope we're all on the same island.
Yeah,
so
we
can
can.
share all piled up in that big day bed.
Yeah, we'll all fit. won't we?
Yeah, it's no one said tub, or we could have been the 3 men in a tub.
Yeah.
I guess we had all the water.
So I see by the Katie standing against the wall that it's time for us to ask if there are any questions. Yes, ma'am.
And can I just want to remind everyone that we are filming today so that we can watch all of our presentations afterwards. So if you'll just wait for me to get to you with the microphone before you ask your question.
This is mainly just a comment. I knew you were going to say Dinah.
Hi, Hi Jennifer. I've seen people I know. How are you?
And going back to the color, the origin of color, you two know that Mount Vernon, when I first moved to Washington, was totally different color. But they did the research on it and found it was like a bright mustard color. So they repainted everything, and at that point, everyone was shocked that the colors were so bright at that point.
That green in the bedroom.
Yes,
I love that.
amazing.
Beautiful.
And then also in Charleston, the College of Charleston was painted originally with oxblood.
The cistern still is. When they actually touch up the outside of the building, the
Yeah.
cistern, they still use bull's blood
Yeah.
to paint with.
I think that, that goes back to the history from years and years ago.
And it beats cow urine. I'm speaking strangely at Mount Vernon this weekend.
I know.
I'm headed down there to give Charlotte Moss an award. I'm emceeing an event there Saturday, so I'll be back there and I'm going to look at those colors again.
Anybody else?
Yep, we got one more over here. Let me go to her first.
Hello, this again is just a comment. It's really not a question. I am involved in historic preservation in Atlanta, and it is a heartbreaking attempt at saving all types of architecture, not just the grand estates, but also the very small, even the 1920s bungalows and such. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate someone in your position appreciating history and trying to incorporate it into a new design. And I hope that that resonates for others here and everywhere, that there is a great opportunity to embrace history and still move forward. especially in architecture and design. Thank you.
So true.
That's true.
Anybody
Very
else?
true.
I think we have just one
Atlanta's a
last
hard
question.
place for that. It is.
Everywhere is.
Yeah.
LA is the worst right now.
Oof.
This, this question is for Jared. Can you hear me? Yeah. You do a lot of the lacquered walls, I notice. Are those layers and layers, or is it just high gloss paint?
Depends on the budget. It depends on the budget and how true somebody is to wanting a true lacquer. It's like 16 or 22 coats and sanding in between, and it takes weeks. You have to have everything super, super smooth to begin with. I'd say the majority of what we just use is fine paints of Europe. They're Holland lac treatment. It's 2 or 3 coats, and it's not as glossy smooth, but it's something that it does provide like a beautiful kind of sparkle in low light rooms especially.
Thank you.
Beautiful product.
Do you put that fine paint on with a paintbrush?
I don't put it on.
I don't put it on anything.
I don't put anything on with a brush. I just dab.
The painters that we use, it depends on if it's actually a piece of furniture or a vanity or something that's getting taken out, and it sometimes is brushed, sometimes it's rolled. Sometimes if it's like a thin enough paint that we're doing in high gloss, it will get sprayed. So it really just depends on the application and the painter.
And the surface, you have to be
And the
really
surface,
careful.
yeah.
You have to get that to a level 5 surface if you're going to put the high gloss lacquer like on a ceiling or something. But the English lacquering too is not for the faint of heart. If someone's in the house or whatever, the fumes and the smell, and again, it's layers and layers and weeks of time for curing. If it rains, you have 3 days to every layer. It's a real process, and they have to be up for that.
Nothing is as beautiful as the true lacquer.
Nothing more beautiful.
agree.
Yeah.
It's got layers that you see through it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to end.
wait.
Oh, one last quick question. Okay.
I just wanted to address the paint issue. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Farrow and Ball, since I'm their vendor here in the Southeast, Faraday Home. So they do have a high gloss paint that's beautiful that you can spray on. So
Thank you.
And their skylight in that high gloss is the most beautiful ceiling. Skylight Paramball, beautiful.
Good.
All right, that's a perfect ending. And now, well, first of all, I just want to thank Margot and Margot's men out up on stage here.
Well done.
Again, a thank you to Flower Magazine, a thank you to Fabricut. And with that, let's go upstairs to Fabricut to enjoy a reception and meet and greet with our panelists and Margot, and that's Suite 307. We'll see you there.